I got fired once. It was right at that point in 2020 where everyone realized it would be a year or more before life returned back to normal. I was working in the live entertainment sector, so the writing was on the wall. Almost everyone got let go, so I knew it wasn't personal, but getting fired always bites, right? Is there any good way to get laid off? I mean, besides finding out on a private yacht or getting a giant golden parachute. We live in a time of constant mass layoffs, but have you ever noticed that nobody ever says, wow, that company handled those layoffs really well? Nope, this is a more typical headline. Clearly, firing people is a lot messier in the age of distributed teams, always on communication, and layoff TikTok, which if you haven't checked out, you totally should. It seems there are a lot of ways to get it wrong and not a lot of ways to get it right. So today, we're going to explore the ethics of remote layoffs. It's episode 38 of Out of Office, the bi-weekly web series for remote workers that one of your colleagues said was pretty good on LinkedIn. When I got laid off, it was over Zoom, and because I saw it coming, I didn't expect to get in my feelings about it. And while I've never been a crier, I have to say, when that Zoom window closed, I'm really glad that I was at home alone, surrounded by comfort food, and didn't have to go through that on full display, like so many of my colleagues over the years who had to do the walk. You know the one, the cardboard box with a pot plant sticking out the top, just trying to hold themselves together long enough to get to the elevator and sob. But they can't wipe their tear-stained mascara trails without dropping the cardboard box, so they have to walk through the foyer as well, looking like a pitiful zombie. By contrast, my experience was a lot more humane. The day after I was let go, I cycled my bike into Midtown Manhattan. I cleared my desk and I enjoyed the view from my window one last time. Not only was the entire office empty, the streets were abandoned too. Honestly, the worst part of that experience wasn't even getting fired. It was that the bike route had a bunch of stairs. So when I see headlines like this one, I can't help but wonder, do we really want to apply breakup rules to jobs? I mean, sure, ditching your girlfriend over WhatsApp is a dick move, but if you have to let an employee go, is doing it over Zoom really worse than doing it in person? I mean, surely most people prefer to ugly cry when they're not being watched by the very people who need to write them a reference next week. I'd pick Zoom over the walk of shame any day, and I suspect that most people in fully remote jobs would agree. Even Succession got in on it, with cousin Greg delivering maybe the worst scripted layoff in history. Don't worry, no spoilers. But in 2023, most companies aren't fully remote, and surprise, surprise, layoffs are one of the long list of things that get more complicated in hybrid companies. Check this out. In early April this year, McDonald's temporarily closed its corporate offices, and it turns out they did it to lay off hundreds of hybrid employees virtually. The New York Times quoted a professor from Stanford who literally wrote a book called The No Asshole Rule, and even he said it was confusing. Meanwhile, Mark Nunn-Zuckerberg, the recently titled Jiu-Jitsu master, even took it a step further by pre-announcing his layoffs. And yes, that is a real photo. He actually won a medal. Anyway, Zuck warned his employees in advance to expect at least another 10,000 layoffs at Meta. And you can imagine how that went down. I mean, no wonder the guy started jiu-jitsu lessons. While he probably thought he was being open and transparent by announcing the layoffs before he'd even decided who was in and who was out, he just dangled that axe over people's heads for way longer than he had to. But then on the opposite extreme, an Amazon employee found out she was fired when she got locked out of her internal system, and she saw her calendar was cleared except for one cold, solitary little 15-minute meeting. Gee, I wonder what that's for. So subtle. Now, this is a delicate topic to wrap up with a neat bow. If I could give you a perfect method for handling every layoff, I'd be a very rich man. I mean, whether you lay people off in person or over Zoom, after a consultation period or by ripping that Band-Aid off, people are probably going to say it was mishandled, and maybe they'll be right, but a lot of the time what they're really saying is just that layoffs suck. And they do. They can feel deeply personal for people and embarrassing for companies. So can we please just agree collectively on 3 really simple things? First, layoffs always suck. Just because it sucks doesn't mean it was mishandled. They're messy and they're personal, and even if it was handled perfectly, you'd still feel like shit. Second, resist the urge to apply dating rules. Getting laid off over Zoom isn't a dick move unless it's cousin Greg reading a script. It's gonna suck wherever it happens, but ugly crying in the privacy of your own home is always better than the walk of shame. And last, here's what Zuck got wrong. When it comes to layoffs, too much transparency can actually cause more hurt than a surprise does. Dragging it out doesn't do anybody any favors. The important part is to give people context into the business challenges that led to their layoff and the method by which they were chosen. They don't have to agree with that logic, but they do deserve to know what it was. As for me, I landed on my feet. I love what I do now, and I would not be here if I hadn't been laid off over Zoom. I know it's cliche, but 3 years later, I can honestly say that that was one of the best things that ever happened to me. In hindsight, I'd give the company that let me go a solid 9 out of 10 for how they handled it. I mean, don't get me wrong, it was awful, but it would have been much more awful if they called us all into the office or announced that there were gonna be cuts way before they had any of the details ironed out, or if I hadn't been given context into the business drivers that made it necessary. That 1 point deduction, by the way, 9 out of 10, is for telling the whole company would get to keep our health insurance and then secretly cutting it off after less than a week. Could have been a lot worse though, as our friends in Silicon Valley can attest. Now, your turn. If you've been laid off virtually, what score would you give that company out of 10? Remember, getting laid off always sucks. This isn't about whether you deserve to get the chop. It's about how well they balance those golden rules to make it the least amount of shitty. And also, what do you think of those golden rules? Let me know what I missed in those comments. I'm Andrew Allen, and the future of work is out of office.